Hey everyone, I want to come to you with this second video in this little series that I've been doing where we've been walking through and talking about some of the changes that are happening in all of our lives as a result of COVID-19. As I've said before, nobody's experiencing this in the same way. Everybody's having a different experience of this. Some people that I know are just loving it, like they're enjoying what's become of it, and other people are really struggling. I know for myself personally, like this has been a challenging time. I feel really blessed because in a lot of practical ways, I've been relatively unscathed, but it's definitely something that all the change and everything is impacting me in some ways. And so I want to talk today about one of those ways, which is a change in connection. I think this is something that everyone is experiencing to some extent. Some people feeling very disconnected, some people feeling maybe just a little bit differently connected. But I want to talk about that a little bit. I think that, one thing that is maybe the most serious thing that I want to talk about today is those who are feeling really disconnected. Because I think that for some people, this particular time has gotten them feeling so isolated and so without connection. And this is not a small thing for a person. Connection is something that's actually super important to the well-being of humans. It's something that drives our function, it fuels us in lots of ways, and when we connect with other people, there's a lot that's going on, even though it might not seem like it in the moment. When we connect with somebody else, like in a conversation, we're able to verbally process with that person and speak out loud what's going on with us. And we can have an experience of care in those moments, and empathy, and love, and more. And of course there's things like laughter, right? And we can commiserate with each other, and it lifts our spirits and brings us joy in that way. Something that also happens when we have the chance to connect with another person is we can start to sort of gain a wider focus, a communal focus, if you will. We start to realize others' needs, desires, joys, etc. It's really helpful for us to do this at times, because sometimes, if we don't connect with other people, we sort of start to zoom in on just what's going on in our lives. But when we kind of look outside ourselves, if we're feeling like super happy and we're doing super well and we're kind of riding high, it gives us that clue and that cue to reach a hand out if we're feeling super blessed. Or we might be feeling super down and not be doing well on our own. But when we reach out to talk to another person, we might get to share in their joy and their experiences. So I think all of that is really valuable. I think I could go on and talk about the immense benefit and value of having connection with other people, but most of you probably intuitively or through study or experience kind of understand just how important some significant connection in the human life is. I think it maybe goes without saying, but without human connection, you kind of go from the opposite of all those blessings to a place where you can be really dark and you can feel really lonely and depressed and isolated, and you can kind of go to a pretty hard place. And I know that's happening for some people at this time. Obviously for other people, they're kind of enjoying what's happening as a result of social distancing. It's giving them a chance possibly to grow closer with their families and have a powerful experience of being drawn together as a couple. I've heard from some people, even if they're not growing closer with their family in a particular way, they're just enjoying in some ways a reprieve from constant interaction, which I think makes sense as well. So kind of in knowing all this and knowing that people are experiencing this in different ways, I kind of want to walk through some suggestions on how to navigate connection in a time like this. It's going to feel a little bit maybe like a mix of self-diagnosis with a little bit of game planning. So just sort of bear with me and think through where you are in some of these scenarios. So the first question I'll ask is, are you feeling disconnected? I think that's probably a big portion of people in some way. So if that's true, what is the task that we're given? We need to facilitate some connection, right? It's true in normal life, in regular life, if you will, that a deeper connection with a few people is more important than a shallow connection with a bunch of people. And I think that's even more so true in a time of social distancing. And I'll tell you, one of the big reasons for that is because it takes a lot of effort to connect with people in a time like this. You know, it's not as simple as it was. You have to get on and do like a Zoom call or a phone call or some sort of time where you meet up and stand far enough away from each other that it's safe. And those things take a lot of effort out of us. You know, I've been doing some research just about how much fatigue can come from constant Zoom calls. It actually takes a bit more effort to be talking with somebody in that way than it does if you're just face to face with that person. So in knowing that, it's, you know, there's not relationships happening through happenstance. We need to focus a little bit more on a few deeper relationships if we can. So what does that look like for us? If we're feeling disconnected and we need to find connection, we need to find some deep connections. I think it can look like a couple different scenarios depending on who you are and where you're living. Perhaps it looks like a phone call or a social distancing driveway conversation with somebody that's regular and intentional. And I use the words regular and intentional because I think these are important for connecting in the time of social distancing. Regularity is important because it actually helps us to establish some rhythm in our life and some normalcy in a time when that's really lacking. I think I might actually make another video about the effects of how much not having a normal schedule or any kind of sense of normalcy affects us, because when we have some normalcy, it really helps to fight off that on-edge feeling that we get when you kind of have a time of crisis like this where everything seems uncertain. So regularity helps with that, and also it's important because if you're seeking connection, you have to be connecting with somebody. So if you don't do it very often, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The second thing that I think is important in facilitating some of this connection is that it's intentional. And what I mean by that is you need to have a chance to express your struggles and your triumphs so that you can empathize with another person, have somebody empathize with you, so you can celebrate with another person their victories and your victories. If you just meet up every Tuesday for an hour at 6 p.m. and talk about the weather, it's probably not going to be very valuable, right? On the contrary, if you meet up and you talk about what's really hard right now, what's going on that's to be celebrated in your lives, and maybe even take the chance to pray with one another, that's going to be a conversation and in an interaction that's really valuable and really going to feed that need for connection that people have, and really going to be worth your time and all the effort that it takes to connect in the midst of social distancing during a pandemic. I want to make a note here that if you're pursuing this sort of regular and intentional sort of relationship, think of somebody who also might really benefit from that. Think of a friend who may really value your time and may be looking for a way to connect as well. Somebody else who might be feeling disconnected. For those of you who are experiencing this pandemic in a different way and are feeling really connected, I think you need to actually be processing a similar question and be thinking, okay, I'm feeling connected. Who is there out there that I'm in relationship with in any way that I could connect with more intentionally, because I know that they're not feeling connected. We talk about this in faith in a lot of ways, you know, being blessed to be a blessing. We think about this, I think, financially a lot, but in a time like this, I think connection is one of those things we need to be thinking about. If you're somebody who has somebody with regular interaction, either if that's with your family or somebody outside of your family, you need to look for ways to give that away to people who don't have that in a time like this. Okay, that kind of maybe leads me to another scenario that some of you might be experiencing, in which you maybe aren't that connected with the outside world, but you have a chance right now to seek a deeper connection or a relationship with the people you're stuck with, in a sense. I think some of us are feeling disconnected, but we have this really incredible opportunity actually to deepen the relationships that we have with our family or with our partners. And again, I think the way to do that is kind of similar to what we talked about with just somebody who's not a part of the people who are living with you. It might not seem as intuitive But you need to give some structure to these things sometimes. They might be around all the time, but sometimes in order to deepen that relationship and to facilitate meaningful connection together, you have to insert some regularity and insert some intentionality. So if this is your family, maybe it means like, okay, every Wednesday we are doing game night. We're going to have a check-in where everybody who's around the table says like, how's this week been? What's a struggle been? What's a joy been? Like, what's going on with all of you? And then, afterwards proceed to try to crush each other in Settlers of Catan. Or, if you're a couple, you might be around each other a lot, but are you actually taking a chance to have a real conversation where you're asking like, how are you doing? What are you thinking about these days? For some people, you might be able to do that more naturally, and it just happens when you have time together, when you think, okay, this is a time to be intentional with this time. For some people, it might work to set something up every day. Maybe you have a morning coffee where you're saying like, what was yesterday like? What are you planning for today? And you pray with each other before you move forward. Whatever works for you, I just think it's an opportunity right now to facilitate great connection with those who you're stuck with in some ways. Okay, so that's kind of some things for those who aren't really feeling connected. But are you feeling connected? I guess if you are, maybe I would just say good work, keep it up. But again, remember that we're blessed to be a blessing. So remember to try to reach out if you can, to pass it on, if you will. Maybe pray with God about that one person that he needs you to reach out to. There might be another sort of scenario here, which is you're not feeling connected, but you're also sort of feeling joyfully disconnected. And I think that I've talked with some people who are experiencing this in some way. They're feeling this reprieve, and I think this is, again, an opportunity. I think it's a good chance to examine what exactly you're feeling and try to figure out maybe what in your current life, or what in your life before this pandemic, I guess, has made it so that you're appreciating this time of disconnection so much. The way that I would suggest doing this probably is through journaling. If you haven't done much with journaling, I think when you're trying to do some self-examination and kind of figure out the feelings that you're having, it can be really useful for you to write it out and just write down the thoughts that you're having. I think you'll be surprised how well you can explain you to yourself. Sometimes there's remarkable clarity that comes out of just a simple time of journaling. So I would encourage you to do that. I don't know what you'll find. You might find that God's trying to teach you a way to create better relational boundaries when you kind of move forward in the midst of this pandemic and move forward after things sort of go back to more normal human interaction. Maybe you'll find through journaling and self-examination that you don't really have any issue in your previous habits. It's just really good for you right now to have a time where you have some time to disconnect, and that's totally valid. I think that can be a good thing for us to step back sometimes and just sort of spend some time alone and with God. I do want to warn you, though, that sometimes can turn from good to bad if we don't monitor it. Sometimes we can sort of turn sour towards people from something that's happened to us. We can turn sour towards connection and start to avoid it for a long, long time. And then it kind of heads down this dangerous road to a dark and bitter place where we become really bitter about connecting with anyone. And so I'll just warn you that if you're experiencing reprieve and you're enjoying it, that's great. But be sure to check in with yourself and make sure that you're not sort of closing yourself off from connections long term. So we've kind of walked through a lot of different things, and maybe you've kind of identified with some of the stuff we've talked about. Perhaps not, but regardless, I'm sure that you're experiencing some sort of change in the way your relationships look right now. And I would encourage you, even if not a lot in this video applied directly to you, to at least spend some time doing some self-examination. Try to figure out what it is that you're feeling and what might be healthy for you to do moving forward. That's something that happens in a crisis time like this, when so much change comes into our life, is it can be really hurtful for us when we just leave everything in the background of our minds and leave all of our emotions sort of unaddressed. And it can be really helpful when we intentionally take some time to say, like, okay, what am I thinking? What am I experiencing? What am I going through? And what might God be calling me to live in a more healthy way, in a more fruitful way right now? So try to do that however works for you. Like I said, I think journaling is a great place to start. Maybe it's through conversations with somebody for you. If you want somebody to process things out with, and you know, you'd like to do that with me or with Jeremy, I know we would love to get an email or a call from you and sort of walk through your experience of this time and have a chance to pray together or chat together or whatever would be helpful. So thanks for tuning in to another response video, if you'll call it that, response to this change from COVID-19. I'm going to pray, and then hopefully I'll see you all soon. Dear Lord, thank you for the chance to talk in this video to people that I care for, Lord. Thank you for those who are coming and maybe seeing this who I don't even know, God. Pray that you would use it in some way to teach or to inspire a thought that's from you. God, help us to be connected in the midst of a time where connection is a little bit more difficult, Lord. Give us significant connection, a regular connection, intentional connection that feeds our soul and gives us that fuel that we need, God. We rely on you in this time more than ever, and I thank you for that. I thank you for the reliance that you might be inspiring in some of us. Help us to continue to live in that trust throughout the midst of all this change, and then in the future when a lot of it's gone. Pray all this in your mighty name. Amen. Okay, thanks everyone. Talk to you soon.